guys, I'm Taylor. This is the introduction video for the Quilting 101 quilt creation quilt along that we're going to be starting. This is a private quilt along, so if you've stumbled across this randomly, I'm going to be posting videos of all the steps to make a quilt, so please feel free to come back and participate. This is kind of an introduction for those that are participating, but of course you can stick around if you'd like to. So I do have my notes here. I just want to talk to you guys about what this is going to be about and what it's going to look like. So I have some notes that I want to go over, but this is just going to be a little more informal than normally it will be. So the quilt along is going to be freeform, but with structure. So like most quilt alongs follow a specific pattern. This is going to be more about learning different blocks and block construction and how to create your own blocks and take different blocks and put them together to make new blocks and things like that. So let me back up for a second and tell you guys a little bit about my background. If you can hear that, that's the cat scratching at the door. I have 3 of them and they do not like being locked out. But let me tell you a little about my background first as a sewer and a quilter. I have been crafting my whole life. My mom is crafty. My grandma's pretty crafty. And I believe I was about 8 when I made my first 2 quilts, one for me and one for my sister. Unfortunately, we don't have either of them, which I wish we did, but we don't. Just basic 4-patch or like checkerboard. Did other types of crafting, not a ton of sewing as a little kid, but when I was a teenager, about 15, I started making purses and different types of bags, tote bags, all kinds of stuff, and I made a ton of them over one summer. I think I made like 50 of them. Did a little bit of, different types of sewing, and then decided I was going to go to fashion design school. I went to OSU for 2 years, and then to the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York for a year. I did not get my degree at either place, but I learned a ton about apparel sewing. I know a little. I know a medium amount, I guess. I don't know anything really technical, and I'm not great. It's not my number one thing, but textiles are really interesting to me. So if you have textile questions, if I don't know, I probably want to look it up because that's super important and interesting to me. I could talk about it all day. Anyway, then when school didn't work out, over the past few years, about 4 years ago, I became the manager of a quilting and crafting store. And in that time, I've really become a quilter, especially over the past couple of years. And one of the things, aside from collecting a ton of fabric, which you can see part of right now, that really got me into it is, well, first of all, our customers are amazing and they got me into it. But I picked up a book called The Quilt Block Cookbook by Amy Gibson. I would recommend this for any beginning quilter. It's really aptly named. It's basically it is a cookbook. It breaks down, this is the block, these are the pieces, this is how you make the pieces. So it really got me thinking about and realizing how to create my own patterns and how to mimic things that I saw, how they got to that point. So this quilt along is kind of going to be based off of this book, although nothing's directly from it, but it's going to be based off that idea of let's learn some basics and then let's do our own thing with it. So I would definitely recommend this book, and I know I've gifted this to several of my friends, so it's just a really good book. I know that not having structure can make people nervous, especially because I'm that type of person. If I'm not leading and I don't know where I'm going, like not having an endpoint, not having a quilt that we're making can be nerve-wracking, but I promise you I have a plan, and whatever you make is going to be great. And no matter what you make, whether you end up actually making a full quilt or not, the goal of this is to learn skills and to be better than you are right now. So I do want to say that the thing that I am learning right now is, and not all of you know, some of you know this about me, I have been wanting to do this, wanting to teach people, and wanting to have a YouTube channel specifically about quilting for over a year now. It's been a dream of mine and something that I just haven't accomplished until literally right now. So this is the thing that I am working on. And because of that, the remaining of these videos, everything that comes after this one, I'm probably not going to mention this Quilt Along group. So just know that if you're watching this introduction, you're part of the Quilt Along group, and then you watch the videos that follow. I am talking to you and I am building this for you, but I don't want to mention it specifically because I do want these to live on my channel as a Quilting 101 or Create a Quilt 101 type of thing for the foreseeable future, or until I can build a new course or something around it. So yeah, this is the thing that I'm doing. I do have, if you're part of the Facebook group and you saw the community rules, you'll probably know this already, but I do have 5 things that I want us all to make sure that we do. And I think they're important in general, but for this specifically, I want to make sure that we all do this. Number 1, I will share my work with the group. I think it's important to, even if you're not sure or proud or whatever, to share what you have accomplished with the group. We are all starting at a certain level and we are all going to improve from there. Yes, your block may not be as good as, in your eyes, the next person's block, but maybe they're starting at a totally different place. And also, they probably think that their work looks worse than it does as well. So just please share, please encourage each other and help each other out when you have questions. Number 2, I will not get frustrated or give up if I fall behind. This is a long quilt along. This is going to be 18 to 20 weeks, depending on how many breaks we take. And that's a long time. And people have lives. And I built this to not be too intense every single week, but there is stuff to do almost every single week. So I will have a video almost every week with a new prompt and a new thing for you to try. If you fall behind, it's fine. We're going to have breaks. Our first break, I think, is week 6, but we'll have them a little more frequently. I haven't decided exactly how many we're going to have, but we will have more breaks. And if you need more breaks as a group, if we need more breaks, I can always build them. There's no necessary timeline for this. So please let me know if my pace is off, if my videos need to be longer, whatever. Just let me know what you need. Number 3, I will ask for help early and often. There's no sense in trying to learn something if you're not going to speak up. And again, this is my first time doing this, so I may completely not talk about or just assume that everybody knows something because it's stuck in the back of my head because I'm a quilter and I've been doing this for a while really intensely. So please ask for help. I don't want anybody to feel like they're behind or that like they're being left behind. And chances are somebody else, I know every teacher says this, but chances are there is somebody else that has the same question or that didn't even think to ask the question to begin with. Number 4, this is the most important one to me. It should probably be number 1, but I will be as kind to myself and to my work as I am to others. I want to say that again. I will be as kind to myself and to my work as I am to others. It is so easy to beat up on yourself when you are 6 inches from your work and you know exactly what's wrong with it. When it's in a quilt, when you're standing away from it, when it's not something that you have your own like soul invested in, it just looks different. So try to step back. Try to, again, share your work and see what others are saying. I bet you everybody thinks their work looks worse than it is. And I will tell you, I have made dozens of quilts. All of them have something wrong. But nobody, when you show them a quilt or when you give them a quilt, they don't go, oh, look at that thing. Like, oh, look, your seams don't match up. Nobody sees that. They don't see it. They see it as a whole beautiful piece of artwork. they don't see the one thing wrong with that one block. So worst comes to worst, if you have a really, really messed up block that you don't want to include, you don't have to include it in the quilt. But just be kind to yourself and know that you are getting better than what you already were. Number 5, I will have fun. Obviously, this is super important. If you're not going to have fun, then what's the point? Okay, I do want to go over supplies and things. Estimated fabric requirements. Okay, so fabric requirements and supplies, I will link a PDF in the description box below. If you scroll down and click more, it'll drop down in the description box and there will be a link to the PDF. So I'm not going to go over exact fabric requirements, but what I do want to say is that this is an estimate for twin or queen size. It's an estimate. It's a very rough estimate because, well, for 2 reasons. One, I don't often work off patterns, so I don't really know how much fabric I use, honestly, when I make a quilt. I have worked off a few before, but I'm really roughly estimating. Number 2, I don't know what kind of quilt you're going to make. We're not shooting for the same quilt. We're not shooting for the same size necessarily. Our layouts might be different, and you'll see as we progress. Again, trust me. But who knows what you're going to need. Something to know about this is that towards the end, I'm going to show you guys how to make your own backing out of leftover fabrics. We might also do some sort of pillowcase, or we can go over other things you can do with your scraps, but it's called an after quilt, and I do them on almost every quilt that I make, where I use leftover blocks and leftover fabric that I want to get through to do the backing, and sometimes even the binding. So we'll talk about that when we get towards the end as well. So if you buy too much, that's fine. Also, don't feel like you need to buy all of your yardage right up front. I know that the cost can be a little bit of a, it's a lot up front. And again, this is going to be over 18 to 20 weeks, so you don't need all of it right now, but just make sure that you know where you can get more of it when it comes down the line. For tools, one more thing for fabric. I have on here either yardage or fat quarters. So you can buy yardage or these fat quarters, which are 18 by 21 inch pieces, or you can buy them in bundles. The next video, we're going to talk about fabric selection and color theory. So we'll talk about that a little bit more, but you can buy bundles that are already curated to go together, which is great. One thing I would not buy, jelly rolls, which are with the fabric by 2.5 inch wide pre-cut fabrics. They're fantastic for all kinds of quilts, but they're not going to work for this. Neither are charm squares or mini charms, which are 5 by 5 or 2.5 by 2.5 inch pre-cut squares. They won't work for what we're doing. We are going to be cutting a lot of squares that are going to be 6.5, 7 inches because we're making 12 inch blocks. So jelly rolls are not going to work. Fat quarters or larger. Other tools I have provided for those of you that are part of the Quilt Along, a kit like this. If you haven't gotten it from me already, you'll get it this week. I just want to go over it real quick because I know if you have it already, you've already gone through it and you're anxious to know what things are. So week 1, color harmonies and color wheel. If you've done any art or design, you know what that is, and we'll talk about that again in a couple of days. These are fussy cutting templates, but they're also to help you figure out, it's to help you plan your fabric. So we'll talk about that again in a couple of days. Block builder worksheet. We'll start this in week 5, but this is basically glorified graph paper that you can print more out of, or you can just use more graph paper to help you plan your own types of blocks and plan your quilt. We have 2 patterns of foundation paper piecing. If you've never seen foundation paper piecing, it's basically quilting, again with the cat scratching. If you've never seen foundation paper piecing, it's basically where you, instead of cutting your pieces out precisely and sewing them together, you sew them onto this kind of tissue paper stuff, and then when you're done with your block, you tear the paper off. It's really fun, and you can get a lot of really cool results of things that you can't make with traditional piecing very easily. We've also got an orange peel template and some heat and bond with the directions. We're going to do a little bit of applique at the very end And then I provided what I use for my quilt labels. I do try to label every quilt that I make. And I will explain how to make these. I make these usually like lots at a time, a couple dozen at a time, and just keep them on hand. But I provided one for each of you so that you don't have to go through the trouble if you don't want to. Week 1, so that was week 1. Week 2, I want to go through what we need for week 2 so that if you need to start purchasing things, you can start planning for that. So the yardage, of course, and some of the background. You also need a sewing machine and needles. I would use universal or quilting size 80 or 90. Make sure you change your needle. People do not change their needles often enough, so go ahead and change your needle. You'll need machine oil. If you haven't cleaned and oiled your machine according to your manufacturer's directions in a while, if you don't know when you last did it, it hasn't been soon enough. I probably don't even do mine enough, honestly. You're not changing your needle or oiling your machine enough. Thread, machine quilting or all-purpose thread. I use white all-purpose thread for almost all of my piecing. If you're making a quilt with basically all really dark fabrics, you might want to go with like a black or a navy, but honestly, I use white for everything. Bobbins, make sure they fit your machine. And I like to wind a dozen or so white bobbins because, again, I use white for everything. And that way, as I'm sewing, I'm getting into this groove. I don't have to stop and unwind my machine and wind a new bobbin and put the bobbin in and re-thread my machine in the middle of my groove. I can just switch out my bobbin and I'm good to go. And then when they run out or when I get close to running out, I just wind them all again, sit there, watch, Netflix or whatever, and wind a bunch of them. That way I have them. I suggest, but it is optional, a 1/4 inch piecing foot. Some of them, mine has this little ledge on it that you butt your fabric up against, so you don't have to think about the seam allowance as much. Quilting uses a 1/4 inch seam allowance, but we'll go over that. You can also, or instead, use washi or painter's tape to create a little guide for you, or you don't need to. You can just use the guide on your machine. But you'll also need a rotary cutting mat, which I would suggest something larger than like 18 inches or larger, because we're going to be making 12-inch blocks, so we need to be able to square them at 12.5 inches. You'll need an acrylic ruler to go with your mat. Most quilters suggest a 6 or 6.5 inch by 24 inch ruler to start out with as kind of a basic ruler. The reason being, 6.5 inches is going to be wide enough to cut most things we're going to cut, but also the 24 inch length is slightly longer than the width of quilting fabric when it's folded on the bolt, so you can cut things off the bolt easily. I prefer, and actually I don't have that size ruler, I use a Shape Cut by June Taylor. It's a little more expensive, but it has these, put it the right way, it has these grooves in it that you slide your rotary cutter in, so you can cut a bunch of strips at once. And what I have to do, I'll show you this in the video when we start cutting, but I just have to fold my fabric one more time. But I love this ruler a lot. I think I've gifted that to a couple people as well. So, but with the rulers, work with what you have. If you have, a 3x18, you can make it work for a while and then see if you want to buy something else. A rotary cutter with a fresh blade, just like your needle. You're probably not changing your blade enough, and it's going to make such a big difference. So change out your blade before you start cutting. You'll need a hot iron. You can go up to like a cotton setting, an ironing board, or an ironing mat, or a flat surface with a towel on it. You don't have to get anything fancy. I just wouldn't recommend using steam if you're going to put your towel on a surface, because you might ruin the surface. I don't use steam anyway, so. You'll also hopefully not need, but should have on hand, a seam ripper, pins or clips, and starch or an alternative like Mary Ellen's Best Press, which you don't have to use, but if you're going to pre-wash your fabric, I would definitely recommend putting that starch back in there to give it some stability. And we're also going to be cutting some things on a bias. I'll talk about that later as well. So, but those are the things I would recommend to get for the beginning. But again, watch the video first and see how I do it. And if you don't think you need it, then you don't need to get it. Okay. So this week, in 2 days, I'm going to post on Tuesday. I'm going to post the first video of the Quilting 101 course. It's going to be about color theory and fabric selection. And then our regular kind of schedule that we're going to follow is normally starting next week. Sundays I'll post the video and the prompt and any of the documents or PDFs that you might need. And then on Tuesday we're going to announce the prize for that week. So we have a whole bunch of prizes that we're going to give out, at least one a week. A lot of this is stuff that's going to directly pertain to your quilt. So we have batting, I have the shape cut here, we've got some basting spray and some best press and the book I was just showing you. So you definitely want to make sure that you're participating in the Quilt Along to be eligible for the prizes. We also have a really cool prize where Gina, who is the other person behind this Quilt Along and who is in the next episode, is going to create a custom quilt label for the winner of that prize. So that should be really fun. There's really cool stuff in here. All of this stuff is stuff that I use. So I'm really excited about this part. So I'll announce the prize on Tuesday. You do have to be part of the official Quilt Along to be eligible. I don't, unfortunately, have enough prizes to give out to everybody. But yes, you have to be part of the Quilt Along. Make sure you're active either in the comments below or on our Facebook group to be eligible, and also indicate that you're interested in that particular prize on the post about the prize on Facebook, so that if you don't want something, I don't pick you for it. And then Saturday is when I will announce the prize winner. So we'll do that every Saturday. We are going to have some break weeks, but we will still give out prizes those weeks. So that's super fun. And the first prize, the prize for this week, which I will also announce, is a $25 gift card, Joanne, so that you can start getting some of your supplies. So let me know if you're interested in that. Last thing, I just want to reiterate, because this is my first time doing this, and I again want to reiterate to you guys that I know how you're feeling. If you're feeling insecure about your quilting or whatever it may be, you're learning that, and I'm learning this. I'm learning how to do lighting and sound and cinematography and be on camera and put together a quilt along and all of that stuff. So I know that, I know how you're feeling, and with that, I would really love some kind but honest feedback on what I'm doing. I know that it's going to take me some time to really get up to kind of the level that I would like to be at with doing this, but if I need to slow down, if I need to, I don't know, if you have suggestions, let me know. And please just be patient with me, especially with the lighting and the sound and all of that stuff. So yeah, it's going to get better. Just like your quilting's going to get better. So thank you so much for the opportunity to lead you in this and to teach you. And I'm super excited to see what everybody comes up with. And yeah, it's going to be so fun. Please leave comments if you have questions. And otherwise, I'll see you in a couple of days.